kindly be seated. Everyone on the back, the seats in the front are vacant. All can please occupy them.
Space for 665 days. The people are the ones that make it happen. We need it to happen. And that's not all that different than what import services are doing.
Companies tell us that they can operate 3 to 5 times faster on the cloud than what they might be able to operate on their own. It lets those technologists and engineers and scientists focus on what they're really good at, developing insights from space.
I think space is on the precipice of change. It's no longer government organizations and contractors. Now we're going to have people that are trying to commercialize and utilize space in a different and new way.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all are refreshed after the tea coffee break. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce you all to our next set of distinguished speakers for a closing plenary roundtable discussion on Global Space Coalition, United Nations for a Shared Future in Space. Explore the collaborative efforts between nations to join forces with India to advance space exploration and technology. Journey into their shared vision for cooperation and the collective impact on space initiatives. Please join me in welcoming our session chair, retired Ambassador Rakesh Sood. Welcome, sir. Let us all give a warm round of applause to welcome on stage our panelists, starting with Mr. Jeremy Hallet, Executive Chair, SIA-Australia. Welcome, sir. Retired Air Commodores, SPC, DSM. Welcome, sir. Mr. George Weinmann, Strategic and Venture Consultant, Challenge Aerospace. Welcome, sir. Mr. Horn, Managing Partner, Novaspace, Germany. Welcome, sir. Mr. Surya Gudru, USIBC, USA. Mr. Sethu, Saveda, Suvanam, CEO, ReOrbit, Finland. Welcome, sir. Mr. Jeremy Rose, Comsys, UK, Israel. Welcome, sir. Mr. Moussa, Abdoulahi, CEO, ConnectSAT, Aerospace. Welcome once again, sir. And last but not the least, Mr. Gurvinder, Chohan, Reliasat, Canada. Welcome, sir. I will now hand over the dais to our session chair, retired Commander Rakesh Sood, sir. Over to you, sir.
Hello, good evening everybody, and welcome to, I know it's been a long day, but fortunately this is the concluding session for today. So, the subject that we have for us is a global space coalition, a shared future. I think given the geopolitics around the world, a shared future should be succeeded by a question mark. Since we have an excellent and almost like a mini United Nations panel here, the number of panelists is grown, like in any multilateral setting. So what I will propose to do is to ask them to talk to us about specifically in the case of their country or their association that they are representing, prospects for international cooperation, collaborations, and particularly with India, specifically with India. Many of them have had long experience of working with Indian space entities and have had successful joint ventures and things like that. But essentially, the fact that they are here today is testimony to the fact that they see value in associating with India and the Indian Space Congress, the sessions that we have. If I look at the global picture, what I see is that, we have not really been able to negotiate anything new on outer space in the United Nations. That's not a problem because of the space companies, but that is more of an issue because of the geopolitical rivalries that have made it difficult to move forward in the Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space in Vienna or in the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva. As a result of which, we are left with some loose sort of definitions in terms of codes of conduct and things like that, which are not in the same fashion legally binding as some of the old treaties, like the Outer Space Treaty or other treaties of that time, which are basically going back to the 60s and 70s. However, those treaties have been overtaken by the new technologies that are available and that are being deployed in space. It is also a question of people are talking about space having become the new dimension of warfare. There are countries that have set up defense space agencies, there are countries that have set up space forces, and countries that have set up space commands. So clearly, this situation is a much more contested domain than what was originally envisaged to be the common heritage of mankind. Now, given this backdrop, there is also a new space revolution that is taking place in terms of navigation capabilities, in terms of communication challenges, and in terms of Earth observation and its applications. Most of this is driven by the private sector. The private sector, in fact, has far outstripped the capabilities of what used to be, till the 1980s, an exclusive reserve of governments. Since by 1990-91, if I remember right, about 75% of the satellites in orbit in 1990 just belong to the United States. Today, if you look around, the vast majority of satellites in orbit belong to private companies. That's the kind of revolution that is taking place, and it is also taking place in India. We are aware, and I'm sure our panelists will be aware of the Indian space policy that was announced last year, that has been followed up with norms and guidelines that have been issued in the month of May. So India is very conscious of the space revolution and its utility in terms of the socio-economic benefits for a large, diverse country like India. But having said that, let me now, perhaps I can start from my left. I'll start with Mr. Gurvinder Chohan. Oh, so we don't have to. So, Mr. Surya, Mr. Gudru represents the US-India Business Council, and as you probably know, space is one of the items of cooperation in the bilateral agreement that we have with the US, the Initiative of Critical and Emerging Technologies. So perhaps everybody, all the panelists, 5 minutes to speak about how you look at the domain of space broadly and how you look at specifically in terms of potential of working together with India. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank the organizers for this opportunity to speak at this event on this panel. So as far as the US and the bilateral cooperation in space is concerned, my focus will largely be only on that. As you must have all seen, especially the recently concluded ICEP meeting, there was a huge emphasis on the space sector primarily under the US and the bilateral. As far as our activities are concerned, one of the initiatives that we have launched over the last couple of years is called InterSex, which is basically a platform where both Indian and US based startups come under the same roof and look at avenues for collaboration for not only in defense sector but also other strategic sectors such as the space sector. So one of the key takeaways on organizing this particular event is how Indian startups are increasingly venturing into the US space market. As you know, it is the world's biggest space market, and there is a lot of investment happening from the Indian side. A bunch of startups also have approached us on facilitating their entry into the US market. So this is something that has to be looked at, because I think India so far has been looked at as a country that has only sourced technologies from other countries, but that's not the case anymore. We are also innovating enough and are slowly starting to expand into other markets. So that is a huge positive step, and some of the startups have been really successful as far as clearing export control related issues in the US are concerned. For example, IDA and PAR that are under various departments of the United States government. So that is a huge and significant milestone as far as the US space activities are concerned. Apart from that, at the government level, you also know about the NISA project, which is a joint project between the NASA and ISRO. We were fortunate to host the ISRO chairman and Ambassador Rasati at the recent event in Bangalore on the 24th of May, which we jointly hosted with the US Commercial Service, and we also had the fortune of hosting the senior lead scientist for the NISA mission from NASA, Ms. She was unequivocal in stating that it's not only that the US is providing technology for this NISA project, it's also that India is also contributing, and India's contribution is a huge thing as far as the NISA project particularly is concerned. So this is a clear indication on the way ahead. I think both the countries are also looking at various other avenues. For example, India also recently signed on to the Artemis Accords. There will be a lot of opportunities going forward in moon exploration and things like that. As you all know, Chandrayaan, when the rocket was discovered, United States and NASA basically provided the communication systems for the Indian Chandrayaan project. So I think this is going to be the future, but as far as the US-India bilateral is concerned, I think a lot of people will have to understand that commercial sector is going to be the primary driver going forward. It's going to be startups and other innovators and SMEs that will be playing a much larger role as opposed to what it was back in the day. And the more we are looking at commercial sort of collaborations, it becomes easier for the private sector to work with each other, and naturally that will lead to much larger projects and more meaningful and impactful projects.
Thank you. Let me also welcome Mr. Gurvinder Chohan, who is joining us. He is representing Reliasat, and basically we're talking about the overall state of international cooperation that exists in the world in the domain of space, and secondly, more specifically, prospects of cooperation between Canada, which is essentially represent Canada and India. So, what 5 minutes, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And my apologies for coming late. It was too many seconds. I don't think so I can introduce Canadian space contribution to the industry, water space. For those who don't know, that 1952 and 62's very first railway tool, a lot of components were built in Canada by India. So Canada the first was satellite from NASA. So you can see Canadian space, Canadian industry involved in space program ever since inception. So USA and Canada were pioneers to start the space industry. And I'm lucky enough to work with that company who started in 1962 as the very first program called Aerospace, which was the Canadian government's official space agency until 1972, and they privatized, and the SPA became private and became UA and also. So Canadian contribution to the space, international space station, everybody knows that we contribute first of all the Canada, next number 3 shuttle arm, we shuttle then most of the robotics was stationed inside, All the communication antennas on the International Space Stations are from Canada. Most of the medical instruments what you use in the space stations are from Canada. About 80% of the work is being done by the astronauts and the instruments used by are from Canada. And then British space is one of the countries working for the development of human program, the human gateway. Now they are contributing as a part of the Canada contribution. Again, the Canada is a smaller version of the Canada. And if you know that we are also working on a module for the power module, which will be the life support system for the entire ecosystem. And on top of it, all the communication from lunar gateway will be done by So I just wanted to brief introduction from that over to you. So now the second part, the contribution. I'm sure you are aware of India and Canada have only since early 90s and renewed in 2002. And in 2007 there was further discussion. There were more discussion on having the second round of MOUs with the bilateral cooperation. And I believe 3 weeks ago there was a conference organized by the Aerospace agency attended by ISRO and represented from Washington DC. And with the aim renewable demand for discussion to have a more cooperation and India, especially through the space sector. And also there were programs done between India and Canada with the universities and the industry and the counterpart. They can contribute and work with different programs which are being subsidized by the some grants available for companies who wants to put the use of actual more technology with corporate partnering partners to develop some products. So there remains work being done and needs to be more to be done. And so potential is huge. So we look forward to continue to contribute.
Thank you. Perhaps I can ask Air Commodore SPC to give us the benefit of his views with regard to cooperation in this region. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are opportunity to talk about India now. In the panel, everybody is going to talk about the innovation of their country to represent India. And I am going to talk the other way around, how India looks at this collaboration with everybody. Please understand today the entire area of contest or competition is now shifted entire world to shifted to Indian Ocean region. Because the entire trade, 80% of the world energy trade goes to this Indian Ocean region. And about 1/3 of the cargo trade goes to this. With the choke points, Strait of Hormuz, Strait of Malacca, India itself is valuable gas strategically so located that it dominates the area and country. The economy is the driver, as the panelists brought out, that commercial engagement must have. Obviously, economy is the driver. And with the growing young population of India, India becoming a global power on the global map, also has one aspiration. But at the same time, India being a responsible nation has large amount of responsibility not towards the global power as such, but also towards the neighboring countries which are smaller nations and they also aspirations. So India is going to play a dual role in terms of every collaboration in space. And I must thank ISRO for that the initiative that they have taken is really taking us forward while the commercialization is taking place. It's a change. I just want to lay the preamble for us as to how it is going to happen. The Indian Ocean region is going to see major key players. There, the Quad members, there is the US, Australia, Japan, and India will be there. And obviously, additional partners are the UK and the France. They are also friendly nations. We are going to have presence here. The emerging part which are going to affect this region, obviously, is the China. Thereafter, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and all other Turkey itself, and maybe far-reaching Russia. But the most important part is how China is going to play around this with the growing naval power as well. But that is where the whole things shifts to the space part. Now, the countries which are going to be affected in this region are the littoral states and smaller countries, which will be Bangladesh, Indonesia, Taiwan, Sri Lanka, Seychelles, and Maldives, these countries. We also expect they need. What I want to emphasize is that each of these countries in the Indian Ocean region have a large EEZ, exclusive economic zone, on the order of the lakhs of kilometers. But they don't have the means to protect, they don't have means to map it, they don't have means to get the benefit of it. And this is where India comes into play. India has to draw balance in the space collaboration while it collaborates with the higher technology countries like USA, Australia and Japan for larger issues, bigger missions, transfer technology, launch systems and commercial as the panelists brought out. It's a good thing for both countries that will provide the commercial venture and countries obviously want to invest. But at the same time, we also have to look at what our neighbor countries require. All the neighbor countries require is safety. The first more important part is maritime security. As when the shipping lines are on, and I think they need maritime security. Not only security from piracy, but also from drug trafficking, also from arms trafficking, also from human trafficking. They need climate laws, they need climate laws. Things are happening. We should remember tsunami, what happened, and all these kind of aspirations that the countries have got. India has to draw balance of space collaboration towards these countries. So space collaboration with different group of countries will be different. It can't be a single yardstick. And that is where India stands. India has to go forward in this situation. So this is the basic criteria how I understand the space collaboration must work. And this is how ISRO is already moving forward. With now the commercial sector opening up under the present government's Atmanirbhar concept, that is self-reliant. Large amount of startups, large amount of unicorns have come up, and I think this is going to take us forward in the space collaboration. The ISR, the green warning, these are going to be prerequisite for this space. The mapping of every electron that we set is one of the most important parts of the program. So these are the things we have to take care when we discuss any space collaboration in India, that how India is going to play on. With India now, with the Act-East policy and the government's thrust on the IUR, both Ministry, Ministry of External Affairs, as well as the shipping, there is going to be a lot of development in this zone, and obviously space is the major player in this. And that's why likely space collaboration could be. Thank you.
Thank you. May I now request Mr. Sethu Suvanam from Finland. You have the floor.
Thank you. So I'll probably start with what we do and then relate to what thank you. You mentioned a lot of points which also reflect from the Finnish perspective. So ReOrbit builds geo infrastructure kind of focused on strategic customer. So in strategic customer, we enable certain nations to build space capacity. And today there are a lot of nations where, as Edmund said, a big part dependent on space infrastructure to provide the national security. And towards that, Finland, although Finland has entered into the space sector very recently, the first Finnish satellite was launched in 2017, 2018. But in the last 8 years, Finland has progressed significantly. So we look today in terms of the number of satellites that Finland operates. Finland is, I think, 4th in Europe or 3rd in Europe. Globally, it's within the top 10. So within 8 years, Finland has actually, leapfrogged in terms of building the space capacity from having nothing about 8 years ago. But also, what Finland has done very interestingly is it has adopted to a very US-centric model, which is quite unique for a European country. Typically, if you look at laws in European countries when it comes to investing in very deep tech, and probably when you would find reflect on that, they take a very cautious optimism, meaning potentially rising investments of anything about 10 million, 20 or 100 million, where as a space company you need these kind of investments. You are typically looking at 8 to 10 months of time to raise this kind of investments.
Whereas US, as we all know, these are done probably potentially in weeks or a month or so. And that's why I think Finland is quite unique, where they have actually adopted a similar mindset as US, taking big bets, and hence we today see companies like iSize, which potentially could be the first unicorn from the Nordics, and companies like us, who's growing at a very rapid pace, primarily because one, Finland has recognized that investing in quite deep tech for the security purposes is very essential. And like India, Finland also has a very hostile neighbor that has been quite aggressive in the recent times, as we all know. So there has been an even increased amount of investments that are going into the security side. And that's why I think Finland and India also, in general, but also Finland in the global stage, where now Finland getting into NATO, has been very, bringing certain capabilities that potentially NATO and like-minded countries want to have at the backyard of this potential post-termination. So I think already there's been a lot of, let's say, international collaborations that are happening on the international segment towards this direction, but particularly on the Indian side, I think there are a few avenues that I would actually try to point out where we could collaborate. So one, as I said, India has just sort of opened a space program, and there are a lot of startups coming up. And Finland in the last 8 years have actually had a lot of successful companies. So that's the area where we could actually start collaborating about the policy thinking, learn from each other how we could actually build infrastructure in India or in Finland to sort of learn from each other to enable the growth of these startups. Point number two is also that I think we share a very common thread, which is China. And that's one area where we could also start addressing and start playing a big role. And maritime security, Finland lies, depends on maritime security big time, because a lot of trade in Finland happens through maritime. And there's been a lot of investment that has gone into space-based infrastructure to maritime security, and that's an area where we could also collaborate. Also, that being said, I also now act a bit Nordic, bringing cautious optimism here, that I think the elephant in the room is Russia. And in the last, 2.5 years, there has been, things haven't been progress, at least in terms of the private sector. In fact, I don't think India and Finland has any space MOUs that have been signed. And the definition that's where still I'm talking about. For potential Finland is only Nordic countries that can have, space MOUs signed between India and Finland. So there are these, let's say, outstanding issues where I think there is a degree of trust that has to be built on both sides. And there is a big opportunity that we could actually open.
Thank you. May I now request Mr. Monk, who represents Novaspace from Germany. You have the floor.
Yes, well, thank you for the opportunity to also join this panel here at the end today. Novaspace is a globally active consultancy firm, and we are active in many continents with strategy advice, but also engaging communities, engaging innovation programs. And I think space, with all the geopolitical implications we see, is and will remain a global industry with extremely global ties. There will be exceptions of very strategic users where supply chains are a little bit more restricted, and experts in imports and exports are a little bit more confined. Now, our experience is building ecosystems cross-border was actually a key success for both sides of the plan, or both sides of the pipe. We worked since 2012 on a program called GNSS Asia, which was leading to bilateral cooperation between Europe and India. And coincidentally, we have 27 member states in both unions, so to speak. And we worked with Bangalore, Kolkata. We had workshops in Hyderabad, in Pune, in many places, and also here in Delhi. Now, this was, we only visited Israel once or twice in that period, because the program was not meant to be a space cooperation program. It was meant to build around the notion of GNSS, PLT, Galileo, Gagan, Navi, and so forth. Communities of entrepreneurs, innovators, and users. We organized workshops here in Delhi with the railway board and European and Indian GNSS providers. As a result, in India, we're using now the European developed EMTRS standard for modern railways. Yeah? Also, similar activities we have initiated was working with the road authorities on the innovation and modernization of the road tolling systems to help and see how satellite navigation-enabled technologies could be considered for that and understand why some advancements have been made since. Similarly, we organized innovation campaigns, hackathons with hundreds of students, online, offline, in different parts, and even concluded that during the pandemic. So those are grassroots activities that build a backdrop of conversations where then the institutional cooperation across continents can also happen. So if anyone would like to know more about it, I'm happy to share it.
Thank you. May I now give the floor to Mr. Jeremy Hallet, who is the chairman of the Space Industry Association of Australia.
Thanks, Ambassador, and good evening, everyone. Nice to be with you. Just quickly, the Space Industry Association of Australia is the peak body for the space sector in Australia, and it's lovely to be here in Delhi representing our sector. Thinking about how space has a role to play in international partnerships in the future, I think it's important to remember that traditionally and even now, despite the geopolitical turmoil we observe around the world, collaborating in space capability has a way of transcending those disagreements. And one of the reasons that is and one of the reasons we're all here participating in the space sector, is that pursuing gains in space and exploring the universe is actually something that unites us and excites us and pushes the bounds of human ingenuity and allows us to unlock the new capabilities and new services to improve life here back on Earth. And as I look to the future of how we can engage internationally in terms of space capability, I think it's important to think about what those benefits are that we can keep providing and accelerating here on Earth. And it's the stuff that we take for granted so often, but yet which so much of the world still lacks. Simple connectivity and the ability to communicate and access modern technologies like financial services, healthcare, and education are so often provided by satellite communications capability. I think there's an increasing opportunity for countries in the Indo-Pacific to collaborate to enable satellite communications connectivity to those that don't have it. Another one, which sounds so obvious, but is increase in the use of the downstream capabilities of what Earth observation can provide. Coming from Australia, we have strong expertise in technical aspects of Earth observation because of the terrestrial industries that rely upon it. We're a resource-rich nation, and the resources sector, whether it's mining or oil and gas or energy, rely heavily on remote sensing capability to optimise those operations. And there's great opportunity to partner on that. Similarly, in agricultural services, to increase the yields of crops, to improve food security. It's an important part of international collaboration in the future. Another one, I think, looking forward to the future that I'm getting excited about is the emerging role that the commercial low orbit economy is going to play in unlocking new advances in technologies back here on Earth. Kind of catalysed by the end of life of the International Space Station, which is really the planet's microgravity laboratory environment. We will see, hopefully, financing notwithstanding the proliferation of commercial low Earth orbit space stations, where we can see increasingly industry and academia unlock new capabilities by doing experimentation in low Earth orbit microgravity, whether that's developing new drugs and remedies for pharmaceuticals, whether developing new agricultural techniques for food security, or new materials to build buildings and structures more efficiently here on Earth. I think is very important. And then the last one, and actually you made me think of this in talking about the various treaties that kind of govern how we use space. I think the world has switched to industry demanding more of itself and of our governments about setting responsible norms and behaviours of the use of space. For all the reasons I just outlined, humanity is fundamentally reliable on the capability that we have in space today and that we will have in the future to progress our civilization. And therefore, if we don't use that domain wisely, it's at risk. And so I think an area where we need to be better, particularly from the industry side and collaborating internationally, is demanding accountability of ourselves and of governments to use space better so we can keep achieving those outcomes.
Thank you. May I now give the floor to Mr. George Weinmann. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. So that was a good segue because I used to be in my previous role at Blue Origin, working on the Orbital Reef Commercial Space Station proposal for the replacement of the International Space Station. I've broadened my interest beyond just commercial LEO space stations to include now a much wider range of commercialization of LEO beyond SATCOM and remote sensing services. Those are amazing industries that will continue to change the world, but I believe LEO and space in general has more to offer us. But the trick I believe that we're facing now, there's two kind of key things I look at from a finance and project history point of view. One is in commercial LEO, there are many different opportunities in microgravity, whether it's in manufacturing or building things in space rather than building on Earth and then launch very fragile things into orbit, using microgravity for research and eventual production for benefit of Earth. All sorts of possibilities there. But they're still at a very early stage. And the research institutions that have been working in this area have been primarily in the US with some in Europe. There's a lot more from Asia and other parts of the world to contribute to that. And we need to find more mechanisms for making that global community have access to both contribute what research can be done, the ideas of what to do with that new science, new physics that we can do in space. That's one of the things that most people don't quite realize, is that in space we're able to access different types of physics than we can access on Earth. So it's, we like to say sometimes in the industry we have a gravity problem on Earth. But it's true, once you're in microgravity, everything tends to behave differently. And I think the human imagination is global, and so we need to increase access so that these industries can grow in LEO. However, to do that, we also need new business models. And the financial community needs to be much wider than what it is today. So one of my passion projects at this point in time is to look at how we bring project financing, commercial real estate, and other types of established business models from Earth into the space sector in a more comprehensive way. I think there are established track record for doing this. The establishment of Intelsat in the 1960s, Inmarsat, Eutelsat, and other kind of sort of co-op type models give us precedent for doing this. We just need to apply these business models to new industries, because space is going to grow, has the potential to grow much beyond just what Comsats and remote sensing can offer us. We need to open up those industries. That leads to the second point, which is not every nation can do everything. So the United States tries. Europe would like to, but isn't going to probably be able to do all the things that they want to do. And Asia Pacific, including India, has so many ambitions. I had the pleasure of being able to be in Korea, Japan, even Taiwan, Australia, in India, of course, and even in the Middle East. Everyone would love to be part of all parts of the value chain. That's not realistic. So my question to this audience in general, to the nations in this community, is how are we going to do, to some degree, specialize so that there are comparative advantages between nation states and companies and capabilities in those nation states that can work collaboratively together. So to give an example, I would make an argument that we have, in the aviation industry in the early 20th century, we had a DC-3, which provided routine, reliable transport access to air. followed by the 707, which got us into high-speed upper stratospheric transportation, followed by the 747. You could make an argument that Falcon 9, some of the small launchers, and becoming Starship are the equivalents in the rocketry industry to those major innovations. What does a world look like when you have Starship, and how does that change the economics? Just like the 747 connected continents in ways that we could have never connected before with non-stop air travel. At the same time, if you look at the response to that, Boeing ended up being the only major manufacturer of large aircraft systems. Lockheed Martin fell by the wayside, McDonnell Douglas got absorbed, and the response to that was that Europe decided they needed to form Airbus. And it took several decades for Airbus to be a success, but they realized that they couldn't do it nation by nation, that they had to collaborate. And now you have the engine manufacturers that supply a global industry of aircraft manufacturers, avionics manufacturers from several different countries that supply a global industry of aircraft operations. What is going to be the equivalent in the space industry for us in the next 2 decades? Because it's not realistic to have a highly usable, low-cost rocket system in every single major spacefaring country. And the same thing is going to be true for remote sensing, same thing is going to be true for communication systems. So we need to start thinking about how nation states will prioritize investments and do so in a collaborative manner so that all boats flow to one rising tide.
Thank you. That was a very interesting parallel that you drew. May I now turn to Mr. Abdoulahi here? You have the floor.
Thank you. When this comes to give this space global operations, ConnectSAT is leading the USIBC constellation. We successfully bring on the table 5 different space agencies around the world. You can mention Brazilian, Turkish, Egyptian, Kenyan, and so on. And every part of the space agency bring what they do. So in mind is what you were saying now. And we are helping developing nations to get access to the space because we deeply trust that having access to the space and to space is a human right. And how we do that? We are training youth from the developing nations to get hands-on space technology. And also we are helping developing nations use their first satellites also and become part of the space program. And when their mission is in line with the sustainable development. Yes. And the private sector, the private and public sector of India is very supportive. Indeed, we signed an MOU with Scarlet to have access to affordable prices to launch our satellites. And these satellites will join the Osiris constellations as well as the named Osiris constellations. And we are looking to share all the data these groups have captured. And we drafted a MOU with enhanced technologies that are super road to have access to its facilities to for integration and testing for KIPSAT. And we are discussing with in space also for geospatial progress. So, I end this talk by saying we welcome every shareholders, every private and public entities willing to support Aerospace just because we are looking to unlock space access, particularly in developing nations. Thank you.
Thank you. May I now request Mr. Jeremy Rose to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, and very pleased to be here this afternoon. I've just written down some notes here. about the UK, and a lot of it actually is not very positive when it comes to international cooperation and attempts at things, both in terms of the political and geopolitical and commercial side of things. But certainly the world has become much more global. That's taken for granted that we're turning now to Sethu, Lunar and Mars, and what's also happening in terms of the direction going up, we're going wide as well in terms of startups, and there's lots of them in the UK, and there's lots of them over here in India, and there's been attempts to interact on both bases, and they could have been better. But let's go back to that perhaps in a minute. But the world is very much concerned now with debris and space situation awareness, and what one country does is going to affect perhaps the rest of the world. We have a filing from Rwanda for more than 300,000 satellites. Okay, it probably won't happen. But you can get relatively small players making a big impact on what's happening in the rest of the world. I was particularly interested this morning rather, to hear the gentleman from Deloitte talking about the problem that bird migration is having with multiple low Earth orbit satellites, because they navigate by the stars, and then there are these little spots of light coming along and causing problems with the bird migration. A subject which I must check into later on, and I'll do that, when I look at it as well together. So a lot of things are flowing down to smaller countries, and for the UK, there are two issues. There's exports, there's technology transfer, and then there's support, and then learning from others as well, both through the UK Space Agency, through the government side, on the trade side of things, and through ESA as well. But related to India, there's two issues. I think that the UK representation in India used to be much more significant, and now it's pulled back, and I think that may have happened just at the wrong time. I think they got, well, this is my view, is that they will be completely in error. They got tired of the regulation and the snail's pace of the way things were moving. Now they're sort of pulled back a little bit in terms of representation, and perhaps now's the time to reconsider that. But the problem, of course, is that we're likely to have a very significant change in government in the UK in the next week, and who is actually driving the policies of the government or the civil service or the UK Space Agency, part of the independent agency, and that's very much up in the air, unintended. So we're going to have to wait a little bit to see how that happens. So in terms of the UK's interests, PMT is one which is very, very significant, and that, I think, is derived from the UK's position as a financial centre, and they consider themselves, we consider ourselves to be a leading financial centre. I think PMT is viewed together with, say, quantum key distribution as being an area where we can certainly set the standard on a global basis. And there are other issues like life sciences and things which I'm not going to go into, I think, for hours and hours and hours. But what's interesting in terms of the way in which that's happening is that Scotland, the north part of Great Britain, is proving to be a really rather interesting area for startups. And some of those are linked. I went to a SSPI Scotland, Space in Scotland presentation a few weeks ago. There's significant interest there in talking to countries, including India, about joint developments and startups there as well. But in terms of the way in which the industry has gone, the big step, of course, was putting $500 million in to OneWeb, $500 million from Barty and $500 million from the UK. We're still not sure why that happened. It went into bankruptcy, and then we put $500 million in. Who knows? It may yet. I mean, it's been bought up by Eutelsat. It may sink Eutelsat, and I think that the Yeah, please don't quote me on that. Of course you will do. Yeah, I could go on about OneWeb, but anyway, I won't. Maybe I will. It's proved to be a difficult investment, and maybe that'll clear the picture a little bit in the short to medium term. Other failures. Iris Square, is Iris Square going anywhere? I mean, that's not UK, that's ESA. Rhino is, I think I've got to talk Rhino on this one. I think that's a reaction towards the other mega global constellations. I think it's Europe saying, oh, we ought to do something, and wringing their hands, and politically it's not going to happen, maybe. So I think that it's a rocky road for the UK at the moment, as opposed to Europe, of course, because now we're out of the European Union, but we're still very much part of the European Space Agency. So I think that the way ahead in the medium term, perhaps, is maybe we've paid our pitch with India because of OneWeb and the realization that perhaps we pulled out at the wrong time. Hopefully that won't be the case. Let's see next year whether we have a different story to tell. TBD ...
Thank you. That was a very exciting introduction to the possibilities of working with UK in the area of space. But we did that, I guess. We needed that little bit of those everything. The floor is now open. We've heard
ICT and also very aggressive. So it should be asked by 8-year-old or 10-year-old kid, but I am a student. So we have moved from ICT engines to EP. So I know what I'm going to ask you. You are pretty much knowing what I'm going to ask. So the launchers, will they ever be electrically driven? Ever? If it's possible, I know the challenges.
So we're not going to have launchers in the traditional sense of like an electric motor turns the wheels the same way we turn combustion engine turns the wheels. But there are some interesting technologies out. Laser propulsion. Yeah, so laser propulsion is a thing. Now you may not use that for boosting rocket vehicles, but you potentially use them for altering orbits. So you basically put a space vehicle into space, you have a big reflector on it, and you shoot laser beam at it. And it does actually change the momentum. Whether you call that electrical power or not, I don't know. So there, I think the other one that's going to be very interesting and potentially incredibly powerful is nuclear propulsion. Again, not so much for boosters getting things out of your atmosphere, because lasting nuclear reactor, which is essentially like a steam engine, frankly, nuclear thermal propulsion is you're accelerating or heating up hydrogen in this case to a very, very high temperature and then blasting it back. That's probably not a good use for launching, but it's a great use for implanting. Mars in 2 months or 1 month instead of 6 months or 9 months. It could really change the way you would interact with the moon and with other planets and really open the solar system. So yeah, there's some really interesting things happening that are not 50 years in the future, but potentially less than a quarter of a century.
Now, maybe speaking alternative, I think if the slingshot program does use electric power to get their slingshot launches, so that's not directly electric.
That's actually a really good one, and a good example of what I was talking about earlier with space manufacturing. Slingshots are not really great for fragile things like humans and electronic components and even solar arrays. They don't like to be subjugated to 10, 20 Gs. But a big bottle of water or a fuel tank doesn't care so much. It's not a compressible, breakable bucket. So launching raw materials into low Earth orbit And I think in space manufacturing, these kinds of things could change the economics of the industry.
I think that's where all the companies can collaborate.
Just by invited today, there is one LSIC, Lunar Surface Innovation Committee. That is John Hopkins University at Assam, they have collaborated. And they specifically dedicated research environment for non-radioactive power systems to reduce known rocket as well as for the life support system on various objects like on Mars and Earth. So that's what the configuration is being done by the innovation committee. Like everybody to be part of that, learn more things. There's a lot of topics every week. So we might be able to find something helpful here.
Thank you, sir. I'm Rajiv. We see a lot of global cooperation happening in space. Multiple countries coming together, multiple frameworks for those kind of collaboration. John just spoke about the nuclear propulsion. The moment we talk of nuclear and space together, will we start seeing some cracks or fissures in these collaboration frameworks? What are the risks that you see?
In the prospect of collaboration.
I'm not sure I see risks. I think one of the risks is not going fast enough. I think that we are at a point, because of innovations happening with things like Starship, that traditional industries are going to have to pretty much radically rethink the way they build the infrastructure they want to build. Soon, or we're going to find that they cannot keep up. And will be limited to national programs only. And the scale of what is asked of us in the space domain now, it exceeds what national programs and national budgets are willing to typically fund. So I see that as probably the risk, is that we need to move quicker to rethink how the big infrastructure players that we have can be innovative and come up with the right business structures to leverage the talents we have now. Otherwise, they'll atrophy and it will be an unhappy situation.
Also, just in terms of the risk, like today, space is very different. I mean, taking aerospace example of Boeing and Airbus. I mean, Airbus happened because it was not close. If aviation was going to be a strategy, probably I don't think a lot of countries would have come together. So I think the biggest risk is actually how can you build the trust between conflict and interest, because what Europe wants is probably different than what US wants, and even within Europe, you have conflict and interest. I think that's the biggest risk today.
Just as far as this is a concern, if you look at lack of collaboration as far as space is to be issues with the concern, there is a lot more requirement in terms of the international reports that countries come together and ensure that space sustainability is okay, and that needs to that probably is fine.
Maybe also on the topic of what Sethu said. India is the most populous country, and for many people in the world, they think it has the most potential for further development and playing a role in the world. And I think it also comes with responsibility, also on the sustainability side. So I think India should articulate very soon, internally, come to a clear plan that they want to move forward, where they want to stand, with whom they want to dance, on which party of the space concert, so to speak. We cannot be everybody's darling, but try to be consistent. In Germany there is a saying, everybody's darling, everybody's step, everybody. So that doesn't work. So you have to carefully weigh out this role, but you have a position of strength. You should turn space strategy quick into real action, in actionable action, not in missions impossible, and then see whether in certain cases you work with Australia, in the Pacific activity, the United States on certain topics, with Europe on certain topics, but also in particular aspects of sustainability. How do we keep this planet habitable and so forth? I think you have some of the biggest challenges on your subcontinent here for environment, population, and so forth. you should start defining what do we need in the world as standards to monitor from space these activities and really play a role and not to be defined from the rest of the world.
Thank you. I think that's the whole purpose of the India Space Congress and having all of you here joining us with many others is precisely the objective of an exercise like this. Yes, please.
So recently there was a space debris 700 grams found in US in one of the household. So we wanted to understand a very bigger platform when we talk about global collaboration. Are there any big funds dedicated by relevant agencies to take care of space debris or to research? How do you take care of them? Because that report said there are more than 25,000 space debris floating in the atmosphere which is greater than 10 centimeters. And till date there has not been any major disaster where someone has lost their life. But how would be the blame game in the future if something disastrous happens?
Well, insofar as regards space debris, there are certain norms, but these are norms. These are advisories, and responsible countries are expected to ensure that the companies that are operating under their jurisdiction observe these norms. However, there has been talk of the risks of space debris, but so far we've not been able to come to an agreement as to how to have a legally binding international treaty on that. But you are right, absolutely, in highlighting the risks of space debris. Yes. I think we are running a little short of time. Yeah, okay, quickly.
So, there is a first-year framework by the United Nations of the treaty of Aerospace. According to that, each and every debris is being registered and there is a database of every debris in space. So, there is no breakdown. So, we know what's the definition of this particular part, or particular engine, particular system, subsystem, component, so there is a whole database. You can search this. There's a magic and everything in the city and the whole database. For every component in the system in space. So there's no remaining. And then you have there's a lot of discussion going on since the last 100 years. You have a comprehensive technical agreement where each country, according to their capacity and number of launch of satellites, they contribute some sort of funds. So that can be used to what the limits. But nothing else than that. Nothing that agreement will be done so far. Now, this concept is now.
Mr. Weinmann, I have a question. You spoke about, you spoke about Starship and how that's going to impact the scale and the global context in which space industry operates. Could you elaborate a little bit more on which industries will be mostly impacted by the success of Starship going forward?
So I do think that Starship's capacity at 100 tons plus is something we've never really conceived of before. I think many people are still trying to understand what that really means. One way to think about it is it's the same amount of tonnage as a 747 or a 777 can carry in cargo. It's a lot. And potentially, I'm not sure what we believe yet, the investigations of flying daily, but it potentially has to fly quite quickly. So now you're talking about an incredible amount of tonnage that could go to low level. What do you do with that? I think it could potentially, obviously it's going to change LEO comms because SpaceX and Starlink are going to do something with that. Some of the other big constellations are going to respond in kind. What that means will not that, I don't know. But I think that, if you're a remote sensing satellite, you don't really care about 100 tons, right? That's way too big. So there's still going to be, I think, room to have other kinds of launchers, just like we don't all fly the 747s everywhere, even though it's the lowest cost per passenger mile in the previous decades. The question is going to be not what it disrupts in terms of existing business. I think it's going to be what businesses does it allow to grow. And we have not really conceived of what that means. But then the other concern, I can't find any customer of SpaceX at the moment that is incredibly happy with that because they all don't want to know. So how does the global community respond to this, and then how do other nation states that want to have native launch capability, but depending on half of that capability being commercially viable, how do you respond to that? And I don't think people's plans have adjusted. They still think of Starship as a trial program. I don't know if it's going to succeed exactly the way SpaceX imagined, but it's going to succeed to some degree, and it's going to have to change a lot of people's investment cases in the past.
Okay, I think with that, perhaps we should draw this particular panel to a close. It remains for me to thank my panelists for providing an excellent introduction to the possibility of a shared future in space. And I'm very impressed that we have, at the end of the day, we have such a large audience that interested enough and active enough and listening to everybody, despite occasionally looking down at their phones from time to time, and that we had an extremely vibrant exchange as well with the panelists. So once again, thank you all very much and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.
I extend my gratitude to all our panelists for sharing their expertise with all of us. Thank you so much. I request you all to please come forward for a group photograph. Thank you very much. I will now request Shri Rakesh, board member SIA-INDIA, to please join us on the stage for the music dance. Thank you. So, can we have panelists, please? I guess is that for the day. This concludes day 2 of India Space Congress 2024, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of SIA-INDIA and India Space Congress, I thank all our esteemed speakers, distinguished delegates for taking out time and joining us today. We'll look forward to see you all at day 3, the finale of India Space Congress tomorrow morning. See you all. Have a good evening.
और उसका राम का कितने रहेगा देखना पड़ेगा कुछ हो तो कैप्चर कर लीजिए मैं भी राम का कार्ड कॉपी लगाता हूँ ठीक है अब रख लो कोई नहीं मुझे कल ले जाता हूँ कार्ड है ना कल मैं ले आऊँगा टाइम आ जाएगा कल मेरे को कॉपी दे दे कल मैं पता है कि लास्ट कॉन्फ्रेंस में आपको अपनी कार्ड दे दूँगा पहले आपको कॉपी कर दूँगा आपको अपनी कार्ड बुक करके दे दूँगा हाँ आप लेके चले हाँ मैं अपनी गाड़ी जाऊँगा अभी ये करती हूँ कार्ड में नहीं आता हूँ शाम को तुमसे किस तरह थोड़ी वाइट लगा लीजिए सूट कैसे कर लीजिए